Well, Sky News host of Front Page and Macquarie Media's own Jane Marwick joins me as she always does now from Perth for Feedback Friday. Well, Jane, it's about the only story in town, isn't it? Coronavirus over the last little while. It's permeated every conversation that I hear as I'm getting around and talking to people, but even standing in the line at the supermarket. And I think people are right to be worried. I've got a virologist coming on, an expert in diseases, just after the break. And there is no known vaccine. There's no known antivirals. Right. It's not like Tamiflu. I don't think people are panicking and overreacting. I think they're being cautious.
Yeah, I agree with you. Apart from those two mums on the northern beaches who hit each other so hard, one got knocked out and they both ended up on the ground and off to hospital. They were having a fight online about coronavirus and agreed to meet, and things got pretty out of control. But to your point, by the way, Qantas asked for volunteers, and Alan Joyce said they had over 50 flight crew volunteer to do that flight, which I think is extraordinary. And they're going to do things like,
I agree with you.
Yeah. It's brilliant. Leave the food and the drinks on the seats. People will be serving themselves and the like. Look, I don't blame people for being concerned, and I feel that there were some mixed messages at the start, particularly around sending children back to school, and there were mixed messages coming out of China. Now, I tend to agree with you and Alan Jones. We're told today that the death toll in China is 213. I think it's probably a lot more than that, and I would like to see as many precautions taken as necessary. I don't think we need to be alarmist. And those people who are up in arms, you know, the typical lefties who are up in arms about these people on the Mercy flight out of Wuhan going to Christmas Island, well, they're under virtual house arrest in Wuhan in China. I would say that generally speaking, most of them would be pretty glad to get out of China and Hubei province and Wuhan and get to Christmas Island. I don't think that is punitive at all. I think it's very, very smart. Last week, when Chris Smith was hosting your show, Peter, he played a bit of the WA Tourism Minister, Paul Papalia, whose initial reaction to the coronavirus was what it was going to do to tourism in Western Australia. Now, I think that has been the crux of the problem. And what I would say is we don't know how bad coronavirus is going to get. My sense is probably, and I spoke to Ian Mackay, a virologist at the start of the week, my sense is probably not as bad as SARS or MERS, which has, you know, got a mortality rate of 34.5%. SARS is about 9.8%, and this looks to be at around 2% if the Chinese figures are accurate. But my concern is, had this been a deadlier virus, the thing about this virus is it's highly contagious, but had it been more deadly, I think we've been too slow to act. And I don't know if that is because we don't want to offend China or because they're worth billions of dollars to us, both in tourism and in export education. So I think in a lot of ways we're pretty lucky.
I think you're absolutely right. I was around when we had the whole debate about Ebola. So quickly out of East Africa, flights were cancelled. They were not allowed to leave East Africa for fear of spread of Ebola. Now, Ebola is a very different disease. I'm not equating the two before Twitter goes crazy. But I do make the point, yes, there's a 2% conversion rate between infection and morbidity in this case, but that's still 20 times influenza. And we know every year influenza kills thousands of Australians, usually those old or young. Well, why take the risk? Why take the risk? China would shut the doors immediately, so I don't think we should be squeamish, and we will not be the only country. But we're so close, and as I said, it's about the start of term time, so 160,000 Chinese students are on their way. I hope we're not motivated by the dollar and nothing else here.
I think we are motivated by the dollar and not offending China. I think it's twofold there. And it's interesting on Talkback Radio, yes, I broadcast on a conservative radio station. A lot of people are very concerned. A woman rang up with MS last week saying she's immunocompromised. You know, we're an island nation, we're an island continent. We shouldn't have this disease here at all. We really shouldn't. And we now know that the coronavirus virus was prevalent and rearing its ugly head in early December, if not earlier, in Wuhan. Interesting that the World Health Organization was so full of praise for China. No one wants to offend China. Well, I would argue the opposite. I would say they were fairly slow to act on this and that they knew, and some of those early reports coming out of China with people being cremated and on the death certificate simply flu and not being tested to see if it was the coronavirus. I think everyone's tiptoed around China, and as I say, we're lucky and we've got a fantastic health system here, but let's not forget that what the World Health Organization is saying is that developing nations that don't have the robust systems that we do are vulnerable as this virus spreads so quickly. And Peter, let's hope that it doesn't mutate.
Yeah, now just quickly, down here in Victoria, as it is right across the eastern seaboard, it is hot. 40s yesterday, 40s today. When I left home around 8:30 p.m. last night to go somewhere, it was still well into the 30 degrees in the car and outside on the street. Now, what's interesting, the Victorian state government, the same state government that let Hazelwood coal-fired power station shut down, so 23% of the grid went then, is sending out messages in the last couple of hours for everyone to turn off what they can turn off, lest we have blackouts here. But it was always going to end like this, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and it is peak time now as people head home. And I just checked, your temperature in Melbourne is still 41 degrees, still pretty hot in Sydney, still 41 degrees in Canberra, where of course they're under attack of bushfires too, incredibly hot. It was always going to end like this. And just as a footnote to that, Stephen Marshall coming out today saying he's got his foot to the floor for renewables, and he's heading down the path of renewables. He's not even going to consider nuclear. Well, goodness me, Peter, I think this discussion and debate has got a long way to go in this country if we want good, reliable baseload power, and for you to be able to go home tonight and turn on your air conditioner.
Well, let's keep to the facts, and I think we'd all be in good shape. That'd be a nice change, wouldn't it? Some facts in this debate. Jane Marwick, as always, thanks for joining us on Friday.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.